Gut Punched, Alzheimer's, and Caregivers. Navigating the insidious illness of Alzheimer's is something nobody asks for. The disease sneaks up on you and your loved one, and it feels like you've been sucker punched in the gut. Then you ask, where do we turn for help? Who do we call? What do we do? These questions and more are what we hope to answer and give you some direction and hope. Now let's join our host, Jeff Edwards.
Greetings and welcome. How we doing this week? Good, I hope. Last week in episode 7, we played highlights from some of our past interviews, and this week we're going to do the same. Continue with a few more. And this time around, we'll hear from Amy Schenk, Les Berger, and Tina Hemmings. So let's get started.
We'll be right back to Gut Punched, Alzheimer's, and Caregivers.
Are you the caregiver for someone living with dementia? You're not alone.
I was a caregiver for my wife for 10 years, and it was a lot of work.
I'm a caretaker for my wife who has Alzheimer's.
I'm a caregiver of my husband that has CTE, and it's incredibly challenging.
The Dubin Center in Fort Myers has been offering free educational classes and support since 1995.
The Dubin Center has helped me exponentially with so many questions answered. It's just been great.
This is Gut Punched, Alzheimer's, and Caregivers.
My guest this week is Amy Schenk. She is the Community Outreach Lead for Neuropsychiatric Research Center of Southwest Florida, an Evolution Research Group portfolio company. And Amy is an RN with 40-plus years of experience. She started in neurology many years ago, and prior to going to NPRC, she worked for 5 years at the Alzheimer's Association and is still a volunteer with the association. She also has experience in senior living and home care. Now, in her role at NPRC, she does education, outreach, works with physicians, works with caregivers, participates in healthcare, and is the go-to for all topics Alzheimer's and dementia for all types of media like radio, print, podcasts. Plus, she writes a monthly article for the Health and Wellness publication in Lee County. She's been told that she's a good interview, and whatever that means. Hello, Amy. How are you doing today?
Oh, Jeff, it's great to talk with you again. And, hearing you share all that information, holy cow, no wonder I'm tired some days. But I'm very fortunate to have the opportunity that I do. And it's wonderful to talk to you today about a topic that's really near and dear to my heart.
So you do a lot of things. Where do you get all this energy?
Well, that's a great question. I am on my third cup of coffee right now. However, I think one of the things, when you have the ability to do things that you really enjoy doing, and it makes a difference in the community, even on those days where maybe that energy is lagging a little bit, it can be really inspiring. And so one of the things I love most about my job is that I get to do a lot of different things. And that, I think, really kind of helps me keep my energy up. I'm not kind of stuck in a rut. I know I'm going to have something new, exciting, and fun to do just about every day.
Tell us about the Neuropsychiatric Research Center of Southwest Florida. What do they do, and what do you do there?
It is a mouthful, Jeff. Not only our name, but my title as well. And what we do at NPRC, that's a little easier to say, we are conducting cutting-edge clinical research for people who have memory issues. And one of the things that I like to keep secrets down here in Southwest Florida, so many people say there's research going on in Alzheimer's disease, and it's right here in my backyard. And actually, the center has been in the area around 25 years. And so we are very fortunate to have the ability to participate in a number of different research studies with the whole focus and goal to enhance people's memory, slow Alzheimer's disease. Ultimately, I think we all want to get to the point where there's a cure. So we have been able to contribute and impact in a positive way to actually even some of the medications that are available now, and they're in the pipeline. And what I get to do there, we have an amazing team. that's really doing some incredible work. I get to be the representative in the community to talk about what we do, and even more importantly, to educate the community on memory issues. Unfortunately, it's one of those topics that sometimes still has some stigma, and it's really important for us to acknowledge and talk about Alzheimer's disease and other dementia. I always say, just because we don't talk about it doesn't mean that it's not a significant issue. And Jeff, the number one risk factor for Alzheimer's disease is age. And here in Southwest Florida, we're a little older than some areas of the country. And while age is the number one risk factor, Alzheimer's disease and other types of dementia are not part of normal aging. So it's really important to be able to talk about it, to talk about brain health. The other thing that I take a great deal of pleasure in is connecting people to resources. One of the things that we know is that the caregiving has many challenges, and it's actually a new role for a lot of people, particularly when you're caring for a loved one. So helping people connect and find support and resources is also something that I'm very fortunate to do in the community.
If you had to pick one direction, what would that be?
Oh my gosh, one direction.
Let's make
my
it
true
two.
passion lies in education. I love to do presentations. I love to connect with people, not only in a group setting, but also one-on-one, to provide them with information that they need to take the next step for their health or for their loved one's health. So I guess if I could pick one thing, that would be it. But I also know a steady diet of anything for me, I've got to keep moving into new and other things that are all really kind of interrelated.
Right. I think one of the things I like to talk to you about is caregivers. In your experience, what do you think are the most important elements in caregiving?
We could probably spend a week talking about caregiving. So it's hard to kind of distill it into more of a soundbite. But I think there's a few things, and this is really these are the recommendations I would give to caregivers. Caregivers for individuals whose loved ones may have cognitive issues, but overall caregivers in general. The first thing is you will need help. So learn to accept the fact that you will need help on this journey, particularly caregivers whose loved ones have Alzheimer's or another type of dementia. It is physically, emotionally, spiritually overwhelming and exhausting. It has nothing to do with how much someone loves another person and wants to care for them. Want isn't the issue. It's the actual fact that as some of these diseases continue to progress, the needs of your loved one will change. It's almost unrealistic for any of us to expect that we can do it alone. However, think about, most of us think, oh, I don't need help. I got it. The earlier on you can reconcile the fact that you will need help and make peace with that will help you to accept it when it comes along. So I think that's critically important. And really, kind of hand in hand with that, Jeff, it's sometimes knowing what you don't know. But I love to be able to connect people to resources in the community because there are many, many resources online in the community. The difficulty is that typically we don't proactively seek out resources for an issue until we're faced with an issue. And the other thing that I see that kind of goes together with caregivers is, caregivers and many of us, we want to do things on our own. And by the time caregivers realize they can't and they don't know what resources to access, they're kind of at a point that's really very, very overwhelming. So you're going to need help. There are resources, and as trite as it sounds, when you access those resources, hopefully the resources can help the caregiver recognize that even though we say it a lot and it's hard to do, the caregiver has to take care of themselves. If the caregiver's health suffers, whatever that is, physically, emotionally, spiritually, they can't be present for their loved one. So those are the things that I think are most critical.
Those are the things that I learned going to the Savvy Caregiving class here in Fort Myers, Florida. take care of yourself and you need help. Major thing.
You're right. And distilling it down in the Savvy Caregiver class is a wonderful resource. And quite frankly, it's kind of humbling. We many times think that we can manage it all and I can take care of that and I can do this and just add a few more things to my plate. And yes, I can do this, until unfortunately what will happen with many caregivers, and it's kind of the metaphorical, you hit the wall and you're past time for getting help. So I think being proactive, seeking out resources like the Savvy Caregiver, which is a program that's available at the Dubin Center here in Lee County, all of those things to me are a show of strength, not weakness. I think sometimes people think, well, if I ask for help, I'm not a good caregiver or I'm too weak. It's really to me, a sign of strength and self-awareness to recognize that, you know what, we're going to need a lot of people on a team to help me and help my loved one. And again, the sooner we learn that as caregivers, probably a tiny bit easier that journey's going to be.
I think so too. So where would somebody go to get information? They just been handed a diagnosis. They go, what the heck do I do? What would you recommend?
Well, and you know what? That's what does happen. Whether we like it or not, many times individuals may be given that diagnosis that your loved one has Alzheimer's disease or another dementia, or they have memory issues. It's a very short visit with your practitioner when, in essence, when that information is communicated, you really someone's world. So there are some local resources that are great. Probably the first thing I would do is call the Alzheimer's Association 24/7 helpline. So if there's just one thing you need to get going, and I encourage caregivers to put this in their phone. The Alzheimer's Association helpline is staffed by individuals who are very skilled and experienced in working with people living with Alzheimer's and other dementias, as well as caregivers. And so what the helpline can do, well, a number of things, and I'll give you the number, Jeff, and I'll make sure you have it for the website as well. Sometimes we just need to talk to somebody who understands. Sometimes we're in shock and we need to just kind of process it. Sometimes we need to know about resources in the community and what we can do. Sometimes you just need somebody to kind of translate what the doctor has said. So that's why I personally love the helpline, and as somebody who's still affiliated with the association, that's a great place to start, because and I've seen this in my many, many year career, issues don't happen Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. I promise you. They will happen, let's say 8:30 on a Friday night of a holiday weekend, because of course they do. So knowing that there is a resource at your fingertips that you can call at any time. The helpline serves the entire country, but the beauty of the helpline is that after that initial call, what the team will do, if you're the caller and you're interested, they'll connect you up with the local resource in your market. That local resource has even more specific information to what's going on in the community, and that can be a great help. Here in Southwest Florida, we have three other great resources. I mentioned earlier the Dubin Center in Lee County. They do education, support groups, information sharing. As you said, really give you a different perspective by participating in classes. Great resource. Another resource that typically serves Collier County is the Alzheimer's Support Network. And both of these organizations are nonprofit and serve the community, and all of their services are at no cost, as are the services from the Alzheimer's Association. But the Alzheimer's Support Network, lots of caregiver resources, opportunities for individuals who are living with Alzheimer's or another dementia to connect. The Dubin Center has that as well. Right there with Southwest Florida, where we're very fortunate to have those resources. And the Baker Senior Center in Naples also has a unique and kind of innovative dementia respite program, which provides the important thing that we talked about a little earlier, some time for the caregiver to do other things, sometimes maybe just to take a nap. But the respite program has activities and engagement opportunities for the individual who's living with the disease, while it gives the caregivers that break that's so essential. We're very fortunate here to have those resources.
Yes, we are. The thing with the Alzheimer's Association nationwide is excellent because not every city, town, or even state has something like what we have here, but we do have abundance of people who are elderly. And maybe they don't have as many in another part of the country, but still, it's great that it's nationwide. Maybe they'll be able to develop their own.
Well, and it's interesting. The Alzheimer's Association also provides local education and support groups. As a matter of fact, I'm a volunteer support group facilitator. Association is also providing services in the community. And what I always say is, until everyone who's living with Alzheimer's or another dementia and their caregivers are serviced, there's room for a lot more help. But what I like about, you brought up a really good point, what I like about the Alzheimer's Association being national, I had a woman actually, number one, we do have a lot of seasonal caregivers, but also many times here in Southwest Florida, our adult children or other relatives don't live here. Having resources that you can connect to other family members and knowing that they have, they'll be able to access information is really helpful as well. Happened yesterday. I have someone who came to my support group, but she's concerned about a family member who lives up north and helping his caregiver and didn't really know where to start. Even though we can't do anything with our here for that family member, I could connect them up to resources. Again, that's a pretty wonderful connection as well.
It definitely is. And we do, yeah, you're right. We do have a lot of people coming down seasonal and they go, oh, okay, well, what do I do? If something happens, where do we turn?
Yes.
So that's a really good point. When we had talked one other time, you had told me there's some different reading materials, different books that are probably good for people to know. Can you just name a couple?
I absolutely will. And in fact, what I can do as well, I have a list that was compiled by the website Daily Caring, don't want to misspeak. And it's great because it gives all different kind of perspectives on what are some of the books to read. And we're all a little different. One of the gold standards is called The 36-Hour Day. The 36-hour day kind of talks about the disease and resources needed. And sometimes it can be, quite frankly, a little scary. That said, it's helpful to know what may be coming down the pike, even though your experience could be a little different, but to be able to plan. I think any books that talk about the importance of communication and learning how to better communicate with your loved ones who are impacted by this disease is also essential because our typical communication patterns don't work with someone whose brain has some cognitive impact due to the disease. So anything that talks about kind of learning to speak Alzheimer's or, better understanding the dementia experience is great. And there's another one that I think is, and I know it's even available at the library. It's called Creating Moments of Joy. And one of the things sometimes I hear, actually the author is Jolene Brecky. And one of the things I hear a lot is, oh my gosh, it's so sad when I go to see my dad, or, I'm not sure what we can do to make things easier for grandma. Really what the book does is help us better understand joy in a little different way. Sometimes we think of joyful things as being big, grand gestures, and those are awesome and wonderful. But it helps us better understand that even normal, everyday moments can bring joy. And it's really a positive book. It's a fun book. And again, I know it's available in the library that I use here. There are a number of books that are available, I'm sure, on bookstores, but also on Amazon. So kind of read a little bit about it and see if it speaks to you, because there's no one size fits all.
That's excellent information. I'd like to thank you for everything you've given us today. And I know you and I have talked before. You will be a guest again somewhere down the road because you do have so much we just can't contain it all in one conversation. But yes, thank you so much for providing information that most people who have somebody is suffering from Alzheimer's or another form of dementia that they can use as a resource, because that's the thing that's going to help them along. And again, they have to remember they're not alone unless they want to be, and that's not a good thing. And we all know somebody who knows somebody or has a family member that has some form of dementia, whether it be Alzheimer's or whatever. There's a million of them, not a million. There's quite a few. I had a chance to go down a list a couple of weeks back, and I'm going, I didn't know there was that many. And what is this? And what is this? But you need the information, and that's what we do. Because you talked about when you get that diagnosis, that's where Gut Punch came from. And when I look at this, I said Alzheimer's and caregivers, because the caregiver is really, really important. And the bulk of the weight and the emotion is going to fall on the caregiver. So they need to be ready in case. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. And I do want to give a little pitch for the Alzheimer's 24/7 helpline. I said I'd do that.
Great.
And you mentioned it. When you get that gut punch, there's not a lot you can think about. Think about this. Put it in your phone. The number is 800-272-3900. So I'll give it again. 800-272-3900. And also remember, there is reason to be optimistic about the future of Alzheimer's disease. And Jeff, I know we'll talk about that in future episodes. Thank you so much for having me be part of this. I appreciate it. It was great talking with you.
Same here.
We'll be right back to Gut Punched, Alzheimer's and Caregivers.
Are you the caregiver for someone living with dementia? You're not alone.
I was a caregiver for my wife for 10 years, and it was a lot of work.
I'm a caretaker for my wife who has Alzheimer's.
I'm a caregiver of my husband that has CTE, and it's incredibly challenging.
The Dubin Center in Fort Myers has been offering free educational classes and support since 1995.
The Dubin Center has helped me exponentially with so many questions answered. It's just been great.
This is Gut Punched, Alzheimer's and Caregivers.
We're talking with Les Berger. Hi, Les. How you doing today?
Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing fine. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've been up to lately?
Well, I live in a very vibrant retirement community in Northern Virginia. Came here a couple of years ago as my wife's Alzheimer's continued to progress, so we could be closer to our kids. She passed away in December of 2021, and I've remained active in the support group, in volunteering in an adult daycare program for people with cognitive impairment, primarily Alzheimer's. I serve on a health committee in the community. I do medical writing, and enjoy being around my kids and grandkids, which hadn't been the case since our first went off to college back in 1984. So it's wonderful having the family together. And boy, my wife sure would have enjoyed having the kids and grandkids around, to be sure.
Yeah,
and I try to do a little traveling. So
good for you. Good for you. Tell us about your wife, Julie, and what did you do when you found out that she had Alzheimer's? How did that feel, and what did you do?
Well, Jeff, I was married to a wonderful woman for 61 years, an absolutely brilliant, wonderful, caring wife, mom. Worked for the American Red Cross for 50 years in numerous roles.
Wow.
Traveling around the world, helping people. It was in 2015 now that Julie came to me and told me that something was wrong. There were some parts of her memory. There was something very different. And she said, don't tell me that everybody, misplaces their keys. She said, I used to be able to do all kinds of math in my head and she can't do it. And, there was definitely something wrong.
Right.
So in 2015, she had symptoms for about a year that she managed to hide from me. So in 2015, we went to see a neuropsychologist that did an extensive battery of tests. We went back to see the neurologist, the psychologist, about a week later, and she told us that Julie had what she called MCI, a mild cognitive impairment.
Okay.
Which we knew nothing about at the time. The psychologist tried to be very upbeat and whatever, but the reality is that about 10% of people that have MCI each year go on to more significant cognitive problems, primarily Alzheimer's disease. So we actually, each year, our kids and families all get together during the summer. And that summer, we sat around one evening, each with a copy of the psychologist's report, and we talked about it. Alzheimer's wasn't unknown in my wife's family. She had 2 or 3 aunts and uncles, actually, who had Alzheimer's. So we were aware of the disease. Lots of emotion, as you can imagine, with all of us sitting around and talking about what's next. Lots of tears. But that was that. We continued to try to live our life pretty normally, but Julie's symptoms continued. And so several months later, she said, I'm really getting worse. And I recognized that. So we went back to the psychologist, repeated some of the tests, and at that point diagnosed Julie with Alzheimer's disease in the early stage.
Gotcha.
And I think, as you know, and your listeners know, that in a way, people think of Alzheimer's as having an early, a middle, and a late stage.
Right.
And while I've actually met people who stayed in the early stage for 10 or 15 years.
Wow.
For most people, the length of the disease, 7 or 8 years, and you get into that advanced stage and die. So at that point, with the diagnosis, we tried to put our finances in order, and we established a trust for our family and rewrote our wills and went through all that kind of stuff. And Julie insisted that she wanted to be in a clinical trial to help herself if she could, but to help others, which was really her main reason. And so we explored on the NIH website, the National Institutes of Health. They have a website that's called clinicaltrials.com. And we found a couple of trials Julie would be interested in that were nearby where we lived. And from that time, for about 3 years, Julie was in 2 trials. She was in one for about 2 years where she was getting an intravenous medication every 2 weeks to every month. And at the end of 2 years, the pharmaceutical company discontinued because it was not showing to be of any help. And then she went into another trial, for probably less than a year or about a year. And at that point, she became more seriously involved, and she no longer wanted to be part of that.
Mm-hmm.
So, early on, we went right to the Alzheimer's Association.
Okay.
They have a wonderful website, and they really are a wonderful organization that have all kinds of resources. They have a 24-hour hotline that I've used. When I had an issue, and I call them and get some advice from people who are trained to do that. We joined the support group that was for caregivers as well as people affected with a cognitive impairment.
Mm-hmm.
That was a very, we made wonderful friends, and it was wonderful to do it, and kind of depressing all at the same time.
Yeah.
There were about 20 or 30 couples involved in that. Some were husbands and wives. Some was a daughter with a mother. One was a very dear friend. And most of the people had Alzheimer's. And you really learn a lot from each other. And you contribute and help other people that maybe are at an earlier stage and are looking for more advice. And I found that to be really very, very helpful, very comforting.
Right.
As well.
So
that's kind of what we did, and I mean, Julie then progressed into the middle stage where she really needed someone to be around all the time, and at that point, I retired from what I was doing, my third retirement, and I became her full-time caregiver, and we lived in a wonderful city in Vancouver, Washington. Wonderful neighbors, a wonderful community, people so very helpful. There were lots of folks that we could lean on that would, hey, why don't you bring Julie over and we'll have coffee, and I'm going to go shopping, and Julie can go with me, and all those kind of things.
Right.
Which gave me a respite, which was really, really good, Jeff.
That's good to know.
If there's nothing else, I would say to people that are listening, and something that I do a lot now is talking to people who are caregivers. No matter how you think you're getting the care that you need to take care of yourself, you're not. You really need to figure out a way of taking care of yourself.
Definitely. That's what they told me. Take care of yourself first, and then you can take care of your loved one.
That's right. I mean, if your health fails, you're not any good to anybody else. But it's such a terrible disease. It is so wearing on the people who are the caregivers. Julie and I early on, and with friends, we would laugh and cry together. But when someone asks you the same question 10 times in 5 minutes,
mm-hmm.
It is really, really hard for most of us to just stay cool through all that.
Right.
Right. And so you really need to learn how to do that, and you need to go to the gym or take a walk, or when someone would look after Julie, I would go, I'd go get some lunch at Panera's or someplace like that, and I'd go drive by the Columbia River, and I just parked and watched the river and the birds and the people walking by, and I'd eat my sandwich, and I would just chill out. And that really is just so important for people.
Is that the advice you would give to a caregiver who's just starting the journey, or is there anything more specific?
Well, I mean, that would be a really important piece of advice, and that is you really need to figure out how to take care of yourself. A second thing that I had mentioned is there are support groups everywhere. reach out to a support group. It becomes an extended family for you, and it's really there with all kinds of advice. As you probably know, Jeff, oftentimes people with Alzheimer's, their personal hygiene fails.
Yeah.
Whether it's not wanting to brush their teeth or take a shower or whatever. And we would talk about that in the support group. You know, there was one guy who said, you know, is there a problem when I go take a shower? I just take my wife in the shower with me.
Good idea.
She seems to, yeah, and she said, you know, he said that she seems to tolerate that, you know.
Yeah.
Someone else talked about, you know, just have them sit in the shower and just take off their shoes and socks and use the water on their feet to begin with and whatever. I mean, you just pick up all these little points from people, you know. So support group, I think, is very important. And the third thing I would say, again, I mentioned, is the Alzheimer's Association. They have chapters in every state. I found the one in Washington State and in Oregon were extremely helpful. They had programs for people. They had a choir. They had art programs. They took people on walks, and they went to the museum. They went to the park. So that really was a wonderful thing to do. I did a lot of reading as well, and you know, since we talked, I've actually given my books to other people, but there have been people with early Alzheimer's who've written books. There have been family members. There have been scientists, and so that reading also gave me a lot of insight and provided a lot of support for me. So I knew what I was looking forward to, and you know what was coming up and all that.
Right.
So reading would be another thing, and I guess one other thing I would mention would be I was blessed to have a very close friend when I lived in Vancouver, and as Julie's disease progressed, and I had someone come to the house to provide care for Julie for like 3 or 4 hours, so I could get out of the house and go shopping or do whatever I needed to do. This fella and I we'd go out to lunch together, and you know, it was just wonderful. It was like I used to say, I'm getting a lot of couch time from you. You know, we would go out to lunch and we'd be gone for a couple hours, and we'd come back home and we'd pull into my driveway, and you know, Jeff, we'd sit there and we'd talk for another hour.
Yeah.
You know,
that's really good. You need that.
Yeah,
you need to be able to vent.
Right. So, you know, whether it's a friend, you know, a family member, you know, your chaplain, I mean, whoever it is really just something that also helps. So those, I think, are the things that I would really suggest that people do, and certainly get their life in order from a legal perspective.
Most definitely. That's really important.
Yeah, you know, after the first year or so, Julie was not, and Julie's comprehension wasn't there anymore, and so we had to redo the wills, and I redid the trust and all those kind of things. And you know, Julie had a cell phone, and after a while, she didn't know how to use her cell phone. Well, if you don't know what her password is to get into her cell phone,
you can't use it. You can't.
You know? So, you know, you need to be thinking of writing all that stuff down so you know what it is. You know, whether it's any kind of, you know, checking accounts or saving accounts or investment things or cell phone passwords or password for the computer, all that stuff. So trying to put all that stuff together too was really really very important.
It is, and it takes time, and you've got to kind of plan for that, and based on a stage, and is like hurry up and do it as time, because you don't know the time progression of the disease and how long it's going to take.
Absolutely. And so, in the retirement community where I live, several of us put together kind of a trifold that we name it's important papers document, and there are literally 26 things we have listed on there, and it's just a reminder. And I've used that now to make, here's my Social Security number, here's my checking account number and bank number. All that stuff is really, Facebook account. How do you close a Facebook account, and on and on. So that's really something very important.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I've done a lot of that stuff in my case. Also, there were in where I live locally in the Fort Myers, Florida area, there's a couple other programs. One is with a bracelet that I have information inside my refrigerator that has every detail about my wife, and we update it every year. And also, there is tied in with the sheriff's department in Lee County, Florida. They have, and I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but anyway, they take a cent and you send it to this place. It was tied in with United Health, I believe, United Health, or something like that. And they, so if she ever gets lost or is misplaced or whatever be the story, they can give it to a dog with the scent, and the dog will find the lost loved one. So there's a lot of things you have to do. I'm not at that stage yet, but I know people who have that, and I've heard stories. Some that were funny and some that were sad about people running away, and you go, "Oh, didn't think about that one."
Yeah, absolutely. Let me mention that. Early on, Julie didn't wander. As she got into that middle phase of the disease, she did. And it took me a while, to realize that. Until I came to the realization that I really couldn't leave Julie by herself. I'd leave her for an hour, and I'd run to the gym, for example. And one day I did that, and I get a call from a neighbor. And she was driving her car, and Julie was way out on a main street.
Ooh.
And thank goodness it was in the summertime, and so the weather was reasonable and whatever. But she pulled over and, "Hi, Julie, where are you going?" And Julie said, "Oh, I'm going to the dollar store," or something like that. And this neighbor was so sweet. She said, "Well, isn't that neat? I'm going there too. Why don't you get in the car and I'll take you there?"
Wow,
and so Julie got in the car with her, and they went to the dollar store, and then they came home and whatever, and I was there, and that happened, a couple of times, for me. And one of my granddaughters said, "Grandpa, you can put a little pediatric lock on the inside of the door that Grandma won't be able to open, but you can open the door from the outside, so it's still safe." And son of a gun, if you go onto Amazon and you ask for pediatric locks or something like that, this is a simple little plastic thing that you Velcro right by the door handle, and it sets up against the handle, so you can't pull the handle down unless you depress a button.
Okay.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does.
And so for $11 I bought that, and I was able to put it, in our house, in our apartment here in the retirement community, because when we went to bed at night, sometimes Julie would get up and, I'm sleeping dead to the world, and Julie would get up and she couldn't wander. She couldn't get out of the house. So that's something else, to do. Yeah.
Well, Les, you've provided a ton of information from your personal experience. And that's one of the things that we're looking to do with this podcast is be able to provide information, resources, experiences, the good, the bad, the not, it's just something that people who are just starting into this illness with somebody, whoever, wife, father, grandfather, grandmother, that they have no place to go. They don't know what to do. And that's kind of what
Absolutely.
that's what we want to do. And you have firsthand experience. Plus, you're still involved in helping with caregivers. And God bless you for that. Because there's so many people that need it.
Yes, very definitely. Yeah, do you have time for me to tell one more story?
Sure, go ahead.
Well, the issue of driving, I think, is a very important one, Jeff, as well. Most of us, even without a cognitive impairment, we get older and maybe, we can't get our leg up from the brake to the, from the gas to the brake.
Yep.
Yet we insist on driving and whatever. And I've met people who have early Alzheimer's and literally came home one day, put the keys down on the counter and said, I'm not going to drive anymore. And then there are people who tell you that they're perfectly fine driving. Yeah. And I'm not sure that I have answers to all that, but it's something that people just really need to be aware of. It's not only the physical issue of not knowing how to turn and where to turn, but what we don't recognize is that our loved ones wind up, what's the yellow light mean? What's the red sign, that's on the corner? They really, people with Alzheimer's forget those things. You are not aware of it, and you're just concerned about physically this person knows how to drive. And so you really need to monitor that pretty carefully. Our neurologist, without my at all asking, she told Julie that my wife that she shouldn't drive anymore, which really made my wife angry. Julie loved this lady, physician, until she said that. And then she told me she doesn't want to go back and see her anymore. But anyway, the physician, filled out a form that I could give to the licensing bureau, and they would then call the person to take a driver's test.
Oh, interesting.
And I believe most states have that, and you probably, when living in Washington State, you can go online to the licensing bureau, and there's a form that you could fill out. You put your name and your spouse and whatever, and just simply say, I don't think my wife should be driving. She has Alzheimer's disease. And they will, or have the option of calling and saying that person needs to come in for a driver's test.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Fortunately for me, when the doctor told my wife, and one of the first things he said is no more driving. And so she adhered to that. Now, I will occasionally, off the record, have her do something for me if I, had a medical procedure. I'll have her drive me to the end of the parking lot or whatever. But
right.
But for the most part, she's better off without. And our area is growing and developing so much. I like, where am I? Everything's changed. She has no clue. So yeah, if you can stop them from driving, that's probably the smartest thing to do for everybody.
Yeah, and good for her for doing that. People's personality change with this disease as well, and some people remain smiley and very agreeable, and some people become a little more irritable and more difficult and whatever. But
it's one of those things, and hopefully you can get through it the best you can, and all you can do is what you can do. Look for help and resources, and it just depends on the stage. And I'm aware of it, and I hope other people will see it and
Yeah.
take some advice from somebody like yourself who's been through it and still involved in the caregiving thing, because there are so
Yeah.
many resources, but most people don't know. And
Right.
that's kind of what we want. That's what we want to do. We want to help. I'm
Yeah.
not a doctor. I don't play one on the radio or TV or whatever, but
Yeah.
I just
No,
want to be able to
absolutely. Yeah.
pass that information along to make it easier, because I remember what it was like to start. And
Yeah.
and
Now-
phew.
Another issue that came up, we have 3 sons.
Mm-hmm.
They're all in their 50s. They're all very wonderful, caring people. And I had this conversation with them about, well, there is a genetic marker
Yeah.
that may be of some help. And, do you want to know if you may be developing Alzheimer's? Would that change your life any and whatever? And, you're all adults. You need to decide, you will do what you will do, but it might change what you do with the rest of your life. So some of these clinical trials are for people who are younger that have Alzheimer's in their family.
Yeah.
Which means you would be given, the PET scans, the brain scans, to see if, in fact, your brain is accumulating the beta amyloid, that plaque. And again, some people say, I want to do that, and some people say, there's no treatment for this disease. I don't want to know.
Yeah.
But it's yet another thing, really, another discussion that should be had with one's family.
I agree. Well, Les,
Yeah.
it's been a pleasure, and you continue the work that you're doing, and thank you so much for your time. I know it's going to be quite helpful for a lot of people.
Well, thank you.
You too. This week we'll be talking with Tina Hemmings from Visiting Angels, based in Punta Gorda, Florida, serving Cape Coral, North Fort Myers, Sanibel, Pine Island, and Punta Gorda, Port Charlotte. As a home health administrator, she manages and supports all aspects of various programs, delivering comprehensive and compassionate home health care services to clients across Florida. She has over 10 years of experience in health administration, and she's also a certified dementia practitioner, demonstrating her commitment to providing quality care and education to both caregivers and clients. Her mission is to empower and enable people to live independently and comfortably in their own homes. Greetings, Tina. Thanks for joining Gut Punched. How you doing today?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit about Visiting Angels?
Absolutely. So Visiting Angels is a local franchise. It's a non-medical home health care agency serving the areas that you had mentioned. And what we do is we try to keep our clients in their homes as long as they possibly can.
Aside from today, what's your typical day like, and what do you do throughout the day?
Yeah, so there's no typical day in home health care. So on any given day, we can have clients calling and needing services immediately, clients going into the hospital, so we have to reroute them via EMS. We have caregivers with emergencies or stuff that comes up with them constantly, so we may have to facilitate them going in different directions, or clients that need care more urgently than others, so we may have to redirect some things. So no 2 days are the same, it just depends. We've done everything from, like I said, making sure that we do wellness checks because we can't get a hold of certain clients. A month or two ago, I dealt with a caregiver who brought her emotional support chicken with her to a shift. So any 2 days are never identical.
What is home care? Explain that.
Home care is the ability to keep your loved ones safe and secure in their home where they're comfortable. So obviously we all heal and feel better when we are home within our own space versus a hospital or a rehab or anywhere else. They'll serve their purposes, but we really truly heal the best when we're at home. So our goal is to send caregivers in the home to help our clients to do some of the things, to be the extra set of eyes, ears, hands that they may need to be able to live safely within their home, whether it's meal preparation, some light housekeeping, transportation assistance, or just that extra set of hands thereby so they can get in and out of the shower safely.
Good. And how does home care benefit the loved one? You started to talk about it, but are there extra benefits for being home as opposed to being in a facility or being just taken care of from the caregiver with no help?
I mean, obviously, like I said, we do heal better or feel better when we're in our own space. Most of us don't like to be outside of our home. It's hard for us to stay at other places. So being able to sleep better in our own bed and have our familiar surroundings is important, especially when you're dealing with clients with dementia or Alzheimer's. That familiarity and keeping things consistent is extremely critical to their care.
Okay. There's a term called respite care. We hear that a lot.
Mhm.
What is that? Explain that.
Yeah, so respite care is caregivers coming into the home outside of the familial caregivers in an effort to give the loved ones a break. A lot of times what I see in my experience is that family members have, their job is to take care of their loved one. That's what we do by nature. But we tend to forget about ourselves when we do that because we're so hyper focused on what our loved one needs. Letting ourselves go, forgetting to get that haircut that we used to get every Friday, or just going for coffee with a friend that you haven't seen for a while, or playing that round of golf, or some of the more critical stuff, getting yourself checked at the doctor to make sure nothing is wrong with you and that you stay healthy. That's what we do as far as respite care is we come in to be your loved one's kind of caregiver while you go take care of yourself to make sure that you stay on the up and up.
Okay, I understand that very well. What is caregiver burnout? We talk about that a lot. What tips do you have for us?
Honestly, caregiver burnout it's you as a loved one or whoever is a loved one taking care of your family member and, once again, not taking time for yourself. I tell a lot of my clients' families when I go into the homes that more times than not, I go in and I see whether it's a husband or wife taking care of the other, they tend to go out or they end up in the hospital with a medical condition because they didn't take care of themselves or they didn't have the ability to take care of themselves or they just wore themselves too thin. They're trying to take care of themselves. They're trying to take care of the house. They're trying to pay the bills. They're going grocery shopping and they're taking care of their loved ones. So it's the ability to take on too much and not having any time to regroup for yourself that will absolutely cause caregiver burnout.
Any tips on how to cure that caregiver burnout?
Have some time for yourself. If you've got another family member that can step in for a couple hours and give you a breather, if you can hire an agency like ours, or another one locally to be able to jump in and help out to give you that break that you need so you can regroup. That's the best I can offer for sure.
No, that's great. Do you have any links to websites or other organizations that you may use or a caregiver who's listening could say, oh, I might want to check that out and be able to go online and look at it?
Yeah, so we work with a bunch of different agencies. Hope Pace Center is a really good one. There's different local ones within the different areas, and they've got a community center for clients that can go out. They help with some medical care. So there's a lot of different resources that they have through the Hope Pace Center program. So I would definitely recommend that one as an option. Meals on Wheels is definitely another one for those who find it hard to be able to get up and cook full meals for themselves, to have those delivered to the homes. Those are definitely good and helpful as well. I know that even to have the meals delivered to their loved one, it would take a burden off of them, to have to sit in the kitchen and cook a full meal for them.
Yeah.
So, something that they could just quickly warm up that meets the nutritional requirements that their loved one needs is definitely going to be beneficial.
Okay. We'd like to thank Tina for giving us some very helpful and important information that we can share with our listeners. It's been a pleasure spending some time with you. Have a great rest of the week.
We'll be right back to Gut Punched, Alzheimer's and Caregivers. This is Gut Punched, Alzheimer's and Caregivers.
Well, another good week of interviews. We hope you were able to pick up some things you didn't know before. Next time, we'll be adding some of our new features for you. If you know someone who has a family member or friends who have family who have Alzheimer's or any type of dementia, it would be great if you'd let them know about this podcast. To find your local chapter of the Alzheimer's Association, you can visit alz.org/local resources /find your local chapter. Or the Elder Care Locator at 1-800-677-1116. Or you can use the Elder Care Locator online tool. And you might want to check out the Dementia Society of America at Dementia, that's DEMENTIA, Society, SOCIETY.org. If you have any questions or thoughts about Gut Punched, Alzheimer's, and caregivers, or if there's a specific topic you'd like to know more about, reach out to us. The website is gutpunched.com, and an email address is gutpunchedac@outlook.com. A special shout out to Mr. Rick Peterson, Aura Santana, Gentry Thomas, the Dubin Center, and of course my wife, for their tremendous help and support in making this podcast happen. Thanks for joining us, and please come back again. God bless.
This has been Gut Punched, Alzheimer's and Caregivers, with your host, Jeff Edwards. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to us on all the platforms like Spotify, Apple, Pandora, and more. If you have a question or want to get in touch, our email is gutpunchedac@outlook.com.